here's a little experiment in spattering. Your brush is your flat brush, 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch. You're going to use watery paint, liquid paint. This is too thick, so I'm going to dip it in my water and bring another brush full. Now it's nice and liquid. I think I'm even going to do one more brush full of water. This is a color called Indian Yellow. Lay your brush down on one side, lay it down on the other side, now it's full. Okay, now you're going to need a second brush or a pencil, or you could even do it on your fingers if you needed to. I'm going to use a pencil here. Okay, and the idea, let me move this out of the way, is to hit the brush with the paint, which is parallel to the paper, on top of your pencil or your other brush handle. I'm going to use a different color brush handle so you can really see the difference here. Okay, so you're hitting it on top of. Now, if you just tap lightly, nothing is going to happen, nothing at all. You really need to have a fully wet brush and give it a good whack. Okay, little by little, you can see paint building up. Now, every 3 or 4 whacks, you're going to have to take more paint. You don't want to cover everything. You want to leave a lot of white space. Then you can rinse your brush. Really rinse it, agitate the water. Dripping wet is too wet, so you want to swipe it twice. And now we're going to whack water into these droplets. By the way, you're holding your brushes about 3 or 4 inches above the paper. And you can see here that some of these little droplets explode and some do not. Let me hold it closer for you. Okay, now this is the start of, could be a tree, could be a bouquet of flowers. Let's go with flowers because there's more opportunities for color. I'm going to take just a little bit of scarlet, also known as vermilion, an orangey red. I'm going to mix it with part of my yellow here. Get a nice rich orange. Laying the brush down on both sides. Remember, your paint is milk consistency. It's got a lot of color and body to it. You can't really see through it, but it's still perfectly liquid. Okay, now here, this is so full, I'm going to give it one whack on my mop pad just to get the excess paint off. Then I'm going to bring it, and again, every time you put in a new color, you want there to be probably less of it than the old color. Now here, I'm even going to take a little pure vermilion. Let me just get that wet enough. Okay. Now, spatter will go all over the place. On a serious painting, you want to be sure and cover everything that you don't want spattered. In an exercise, you can just grab a Kleenex and mop up the spatters. Okay, don't worry too much about it if it's not a serious painting. Okay, I'm going to leave that like that. I did not need to do more water because my paper was wet enough as it was. Okay, I'm going to stop for a moment and dry that. Now, before we finish our bouquet of yellow and orange flowers, I want to show you how a lot of students go wrong with watercolor and spattering. Let's take some more paint here. Take ultramarine purple this time. A wonderful color, not too staining. Make sure that it's nice and wet. Get my other brush back. Okay, so I'm ready to go. Now, sometimes you're going to spatter a little too much. It's going to cover up almost all of the white paper in the middle, and then you're going to rinse to do the second layer of water spatter, and maybe you're going to overdo that too, and then you're going to think, oh wait, Maybe if I do a second color right away, it will help, but it won't, but that's okay. There's a way to fix this. Let me just go ahead and spatter in some burnt sienna. Okay, and that's really getting cloudy and muddy, and just for a final touch, even more water. Okay, so I have a great big flash flood going on in the middle here. Now, if this happens to you, do not panic. If it's really wet, all you have to do is grab a Kleenex, fold it flat, gently lay it here, and just do that with the end of a brush, and a great deal of that paint will come off. Now, it's still kind of a mess. We certainly don't have that spatter effect, but once this is dry, as you may remember, it's going to dry a good 25% lighter, and then I'm just going to be able to spatter right on top of it, and the new spatter, going to make that a little bit darker and brighter, is really going to stand out. Okay, on the other hand, sometimes that's exactly what you want if you're not doing a bouquet. Here's a frog that I copied from someone on Pinterest. I'm going to find their name and give them credit because it's a great frog. But you can see that the spatter got very muddy and very watery. I just put more spatter over it. You can see that kind of reddish purple spatter there. Some more spatter up here, raw sienna, that earth yellow. And if you're doing a big old horn toad, it's just perfect for creating texture. Okay, now we're going to go back and work on the original. It happens to be on the other side of my frog here. Okay, this is dry. By the way, never touch it with your fingertips. Always use the side of your hand or your knuckle. And I'd like to put some kind of a container, a vase or vase, under it. That should never be bigger than the flowers. It should always be really quite a bit smaller than the flowers. Again, all it needs to be is a rectangle. It's very helpful just to draw it with your brush handle or your finger, not with a pencil yet. You can even take 2 brushes or a pencil and just kind of lay it down here and go, how big should that be? How wide should that be? Okay, so let's say you have in mind how big you want it. You can even do, of course, a more trapezoid. Good to put the bottom in first. Often that's really all you need is the base. It should be, reasonably enough to hold all these flowers. And that's really pretty much it. I know that's hard to see right now, but you'll see it in a moment. Now here's the tricky part. I'm going to show you this up close, of course. The water in my glass container is going to be ultramarine blue, but I want the illusion that the flowers are cascading over the edge of the vase or vase. So I'm just kind of making little dots that sort of follow, okay, a really random little, like a shoreline on a map. Okay, this is going to give the illusion that these frilly little flowers, okay, and most of it I'm painting with very pale blue, also leaving just a little bit of a highlight on one side. If you want to get fancy, you can even put in a little base here and be attached or not. Okay, and for another touch, you can crumple a Kleenex, not flat, but crumpled, and just give this a little blot. Okay, so I have the illusion that my flowers are cascading over the side. To make it a little more interesting, I'm now, since this is still damp, just going to touch in or stroke in a little bit more paint. And I'm going to do that base again. Again, the base that you often see on a glass container like this does not even have to be attached to the top part. If you overdid that, just give it another little blot. For a final touch, you can always bring off a shadow. I know a bouquet of flowers would cast a different shadow than that, but this is something that tells your viewer that it's sitting on a table or some kind of flat surface. Okay, you can continue to go over this a couple of times if you want to make it a little darker, but as long as it's wet, you always have the option of blotting out just a little bit. You really don't want to mess around with it too terribly much, but I'm just showing you it is possible. Okay, now I could make the container much darker, although if it's glass you probably don't want to do that. What about the stems on the inside? Those should be extremely pale. I just have a tiny little bit of green here and just a couple, maybe 3 at the absolute most. Okay, that's almost too much. You can always give those another little blot. So it's just the hint, another way of telling your viewer that this is transparent glass. Okay, so we have spatter, a frilly broken edge, and transparent glass, just very, very pale ultramarine blue. Okay, I can put yet more color on here if I want to, because this is dry. I can spatter it again, but of course I'm going to want to cover up my glass, and this time I'm going to use a smaller brush just to add a little bit more color. This time I'm going to use Permanent Rose. It's another red, very close to the scarlet red, but just a little bit different. Leans a little bit toward blue. And again, just barely tapping doesn't do it. You've got to give it a whack. You can see it goes all over the place, even though I have a much smaller brush. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the droplets I don't want. And then immediately rinse my brush, and I'm going to spatter a little water into there to break up the droplets that are there, and I think I'm finished. Again, picking up the excess. Actually, I found that crumpled Kleenex is really good for protecting the edge of flowers because it's not a flat thing. You can get all kinds of nice edges by using crumpled Kleenex to mask. Okay, but even if you have straight edges, no worries, you can always do a little spattering around it. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed spattering and transparent glass.